I walked into my parents' garage, expecting to see my pristine 1967 Shelby Cobra gleaming under the fluorescent lights, but instead found an empty oil stain on the concrete floor. My heart stopped. After spending 3 weeks in Frankfurt finalizing a $17 million merger, I had rushed home to surprise Grandma Betty with a ride in the car my grandfather and I had spent 6 years restoring together. The silence in that garage felt deafening. When I burst through the kitchen door demanding answers, my mother Linda barely looked up from her coffee. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. She had sold my dream car to fund my sister Rachel's latest business venture. Without permission, without warning, without caring that she had just destroyed the most precious thing in my life. The story of that Cobra began when I was 16 years old, working construction during the blazing Texas summer of 2006. While other kids spent their paychecks on video games and dates, I saved every single dollar for 8 months straight. My grandfather Thomas had spotted the rusted shell of a 1967 Shelby Cobra at an estate sale in Austin, and something in my eyes must have told him I needed that car more than I needed anything else in the world. Thomas was a mechanic who had worked on muscle cars his entire life, and he saw potential where others saw junk. The Cobra was little more than a skeleton when we towed it to his garage that autumn day. The engine block was cracked, the interior was completely rotted out, and rust had eaten through most of the body panels. But my grandfather looked at me with those weathered blue eyes and said something I would never forget. He told me that building something beautiful from nothing broken was the most important skill a man could learn. Every weekend for the next 6 years, I drove the 30 miles from college to his garage in Cedar Park. We rebuilt that engine from the ground up, machining new parts when we could not find originals. Thomas taught me to weld, to sand, to paint, and most importantly, to never give up when the work got difficult. During my sophomore year at the University of Texas, we discovered the original engine block was actually a rare Cobra Jet 428 that made the car significantly more valuable than we had realized. But the money never mattered to either of us. What mattered was the bond we built over countless hours of shared labor. Thomas would tell me stories about his days working in Detroit auto plants while we waited for paint to dry. He taught me that attention to detail separated good work from great work, and that patience was the difference between success and failure in everything worth doing. Those lessons shaped how I approached my business career years later, helping me become the youngest merger specialist at Goldman Sachs. When Thomas passed away from a heart attack during my final semester of college, I thought I might never finish the Cobra. But his widow Betty encouraged me to complete what we had started together. She said Thomas would have wanted the car to run again, to be beautiful again, to represent everything he had taught me about craftsmanship and dedication. The restoration took 2 more years after graduation, as I worked 18-hour days building my career in international finance. But every spare moment went into that garage, sanding and polishing and perfecting every detail until the car looked better than it had rolling off the assembly line in 1967. The deep blue metallic paint gleamed like liquid sapphire, and the chrome exhaust pipes reflected my face like mirrors. 3 months before my trip to Frankfurt, I had taken the completed Cobra to a classic car appraiser, recommended by a client. The expert spent 2 hours examining every component, every weld, every detail of our meticulous restoration work. When he handed me the appraisal document, I could barely believe the number written at the bottom: $350,000. The combination of the rare engine, the flawless restoration, and the car's documented racing history had created something far more valuable than even Thomas could have imagined. I had planned to surprise Grandma Betty by taking her for a drive when I returned from Europe. She had never ridden in the finished car, and I wanted her to experience the rumble of that 400-horsepower engine and feel the connection to her late husband. The Cobra represented everything Thomas had taught me about building something lasting, something meaningful, something that honored the past while embracing the future. Now, it was gone. Sold without my knowledge or consent while I was 3,000 miles away, closing the biggest deal of my career. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced, because my parents had destroyed not just a car, but the living memorial to my grandfather's love and wisdom. My sister Rachel had been the family's golden child for as long as I could remember, but her track record with money told a very different story than the one my parents preferred to believe. As I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the empty space where my car keys used to hang, I forced myself to catalog every failed venture they had funded over the past decade. The first disaster happened when Rachel was 22. She convinced our parents to invest $15,000 in a boutique clothing store in downtown Austin. She spent weeks designing the perfect layout, picking out trendy inventory, and posting glamorous photos of herself modeling the clothes on social media. The grand opening drew a decent crowd of friends and family, but within 2 months, Rachel was showing up late and leaving early. She hired her boyfriend at the time to manage the register while she went to lunch with friends, and he proved equally unreliable. 8 months after opening, the landlord locked the doors for non-payment of rent. Rachel blamed the failure on poor foot traffic and bad timing, never acknowledging her own lack of commitment or business sense. 2 years later came the food truck phase. Rachel had become obsessed with the idea of selling gourmet grilled cheese sandwiches at local festivals and business districts. She presented our parents with a detailed business plan complete with projected revenues and a list of upcoming events where she could set up shop. They handed over $28,000 for a used truck and commercial kitchen equipment. Rachel spent the first month perfecting her menu and designing colorful signs, but she quickly grew bored with the reality of working 12-hour days in a hot truck. She started hiring employees to run the truck while she managed social media from home, but her lack of oversight led to inconsistent food quality and poor customer service. The truck was repossessed after 6 months when Rachel fell behind on both equipment payments and health department fees. The dog grooming business was perhaps the most infuriating failure of all. Rachel claimed she had always been good with animals and convinced our parents that pet grooming was a recession-proof industry with low overhead costs. They invested $18,000 in professional grooming equipment and helped her rent a small storefront near a residential neighborhood. For the first few weeks, Rachel enjoyed the novelty of working with cute dogs and posting before and after photos online. But she had never bothered to get proper training or certification, and her inexperience showed. She accidentally cut a poodle's ear with clippers, gave a golden retriever an uneven haircut that left bald patches, and somehow managed to lose a customer's cat for 3 hours when it escaped during a bath. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about her incompetence, and customers stopped coming. The business closed after 4 months, when Rachel admitted she found the work boring and physically demanding. Each time a venture failed, Rachel perfected the art of deflecting responsibility while maximizing emotional manipulation. She would arrive at family dinners with tears in her eyes, talking about how hard she had tried and how unfair life was to someone with her level of creativity and ambition. She blamed external factors like economic conditions, difficult customers, unreliable employees, and bad luck. Our parents always comforted her and assured her that the next opportunity would be different, that her entrepreneurial spirit just needed the right outlet. But I had been watching more carefully than anyone realized. After the food truck failure, I started paying attention to Rachel's social media posts and credit card statements that she occasionally left lying around. While claiming poverty and begging for family support, she was regularly buying designer handbags, expensive jewelry, and taking weekend trips to Las Vegas with friends. She had learned to time her sob stories perfectly, approaching our parents for money right after posting photos of herself at expensive restaurants or luxury spas. When Rachel announced her latest venture, a bakery specializing in custom wedding cakes, I should have spoken up immediately. But I was deep into merger negotiations for a pharmaceutical company acquisition and traveling constantly between New York, Los Angeles, and European cities. I assumed our parents had learned from previous experiences and would be more cautious with their financial support. I was wrong. While I was in Frankfurt working 20-hour days to close the $17 million deal that would secure my promotion to senior partner, Rachel was weaving another web of lies and false promises. She told our parents that she had found the perfect storefront, that she had already lined up several wedding clients, and that she just needed startup capital to purchase commercial baking equipment and cover the first 6 months of rent. The bakery story was more elaborate than her previous schemes. Rachel had actually rented a small commercial space and posted photos of herself standing inside the empty building, wearing a professional apron and holding a clipboard. She created business cards and a basic website with stock photos of beautiful cakes she claimed to have designed. She even went so far as to stage photos of herself measuring ingredients and mixing batter in what appeared to be a professional kitchen, but was actually the cooking classroom at a local community college. Our parents were completely taken in by the performance. They saw their daughter finally pursuing something that seemed to match her creative personality, and they wanted to believe she had matured enough to handle real responsibility. When Rachel told them she needed $200,000 for equipment, renovations, and operating capital, they made the decision that would destroy our family's trust forever. Instead of asking for my opinion or discussing the situation with me, they sold my Cobra to a classic car dealer for exactly $200,000. They had no idea of its true value or the years of work that had gone into its restoration. To them, it was just an old car sitting in their garage, taking up space that could be used for something more practical. The betrayal was complete. While I was building my career and contributing to our family's long-term security, Rachel was manipulating our parents' emotions and my grandfather's legacy to fund another doomed venture that existed only in her imagination. The conversation that followed my discovery of the missing Cobra revealed depths of deception and financial irresponsibility that I never could have imagined. When I confronted my parents the morning after finding the empty garage, demanding to know exactly what they had done and why, their defensive explanations opened a Pandora's box of family secrets that had been carefully hidden from me for years. My father, David, sat hunched over the kitchen table, refusing to make eye contact, while my mother, Linda, paced nervously by the window. The silence stretched for several uncomfortable minutes before my father finally began to speak, in a voice barely above a whisper. What he told me changed everything I thought I knew about our family's financial situation and my parents' relationship with Rachel. The truth was that selling my car was not an isolated incident of poor judgment, but rather the latest desperate move in a years-long pattern of financial enablement that had brought my parents to the brink of bankruptcy. Over the past 8 years, they had given Rachel a total of $412,000 across her various failed business ventures, personal emergencies, and lifestyle expenses. But the money had not come from savings or disposable income as I had assumed. It had come from systematically destroying their own financial security. My father revealed that they had taken out a second mortgage on their house in 2018 to fund Rachel's clothing boutique and food truck ventures. When those businesses failed, and she came asking for more money, they had refinanced the mortgage again, borrowing against the equity they had built over 25 years of responsible homeownership. The house that had once been their pride and their security was now leveraged to the maximum, with monthly payments that consumed nearly 70% of their combined retirement income. The situation was even worse than simple overborrowing. My mother admitted through tears that they were currently 3 months behind on their mortgage payments and had received a foreclosure notice the previous week. The bank was threatening to begin proceedings to repossess their home within 30 days unless they could bring the account current with a payment of $11,400. But the financial crisis was only part of the story. My parents had been hiding their situation from me because they were ashamed of their poor decisions and afraid I would judge them for enabling Rachel's irresponsible behavior. They had convinced themselves that their successful son was too busy with his high-powered career to care about family problems, while their struggling daughter needed constant support and protection. My mother's justification for selling the Cobra revealed a level of resentment and misunderstanding that cut me to the core. She told me that they had always seen me as emotionally distant and financially secure, someone who had moved beyond needing family connections or sentimental possessions. In their minds, the car was just an expensive toy that I rarely drove, sitting unused in their garage while taking up space they needed for storage. They had no comprehension of the car's true monetary value, having assumed it was worth perhaps $50,000 at most. More painfully, they had no understanding of its emotional significance or the connection it represented to my grandfather's memory. To them, It was simply a convenient asset they could liquidate to solve their immediate financial crisis and fund what they hoped would be Rachel's first successful business venture. My father explained that they had justified the decision by telling themselves that family loyalty required sacrifices from everyone, and that my success in business meant I should be willing to help support my less fortunate sister. They had convinced themselves that I would understand and approve of their choice once I learned about Rachel's promising new bakery venture and their own desperate financial situation. The conversation revealed another layer of manipulation that I had never suspected. Rachel had been carefully managing the information flow between me and our parents for years, ensuring that I remained unaware of both her continued financial dependence and their growing debt problems. She would visit them during times when I was traveling for work, sharing carefully crafted stories about her struggles and dreams, while painting me as too focused on money and career advancement to care about family relationships. My mother had been taking anxiety medication for the past 18 months due to stress about their financial situation and fear of losing their home. She had hidden this from me as well, not wanting to burden me with problems she felt partially responsible for creating. The shame and secrecy had created a toxic dynamic where Rachel was seen as the family member who needed protection and support, while I was seen as the successful one who had moved beyond needing emotional connections to his childhood home. The most painful revelation was that my parents had genuinely believed they were making a loving sacrifice by selling my car to help both their daughter and their own financial survival. They had convinced themselves that the decision demonstrated family loyalty and practical problem-solving, never imagining that I would view it as a betrayal of trust and destruction of something irreplaceable. As I listened to their explanations and justifications, I realized that the problem went far deeper than a single bad decision about my car. My family had been operating under fundamentally different values and assumptions for years, with Rachel learning to exploit their emotional vulnerabilities, while I remained completely unaware of the growing dysfunction beneath the surface of our seemingly normal family relationships. The conversation ended with my parents begging for my forgiveness and understanding, promising to find a way to compensate me for the car and repair the damage they had caused. But I could see in their eyes that they still did not fully grasp the magnitude of what they had done or the depth of change that would be required to heal our fractured family trust. Instead of responding with the anger and harsh words my parents probably expected, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I told them I needed 24 hours to process everything they had revealed and develop a plan that would address the situation fairly for everyone involved. What they did not know was that my years in corporate mergers and acquisitions had taught me to approach complex problems systematically, gathering all available information before implementing solutions. The first call I made was to Marcus Henderson, a private investigator who had helped my firm conduct due diligence research on acquisition targets. I hired Marcus to conduct a comprehensive investigation into Rachel's financial activities over the past 2 years, including bank records, credit card statements, social media activity, and any business filings or legal documents related to her supposed bakery venture. I needed concrete evidence of exactly how she had been spending money and whether her latest business plan had any basis in reality. While Marcus began his investigation, I spent the next several days conducting my own research into the classic car market and the specific dealer who had purchased my Cobra. I discovered that the dealer, Premium Auto Classics in Dallas, specialized in high-end muscle cars and had an excellent reputation for fair dealing. When I called the owner, Jerry Richardson, he was surprisingly cooperative and sympathetic to my situation. Jerry confirmed that my parents had sold him the Cobra for $200,000, which he admitted was significantly below market value for a car of that quality and rarity. He had recognized immediately that the sellers did not understand what they had, but he had offered a fair price based on their apparent need for quick cash. More importantly, Jerry still had the car and had not yet put it up for sale, having planned to feature it at an upcoming classic car show in Houston. The conversation with Jerry gave me hope that the car situation might be salvageable, but I needed to focus first on understanding the full scope of Rachel's deception and developing a plan that would protect my parents while holding my sister accountable for her actions. Marcus's initial findings, delivered just 3 days later, were even worse than I had expected. Rachel had indeed received the full $200,000 from the car sale, but her spending pattern revealed a complete absence of any legitimate business preparation. Instead of purchasing commercial baking equipment or paying deposits on retail space, she had immediately spent $68,000 on luxury items that had nothing to do with starting a bakery. The expenditures included a $15,000 designer handbag collection, an $18,000 vacation to Bali with her boyfriend Marcus, a $12,000 shopping spree at high-end clothing stores, and $23,000 on jewelry and spa treatments. The remaining $132,000 was sitting in her personal checking account, earning minimal interest, while she planned what Marcus's investigation suggested was another elaborate vacation to Europe. Even more damaging was Marcus's discovery that Rachel's supposed bakery business was entirely fictional. The commercial space she had claimed to rent was actually a short-term photography studio that she had used for a single afternoon to stage professional-looking photos for social media. She had never applied for business licenses, food service permits, or commercial insurance. The website she had created featured stock photos of cakes purchased from online galleries, not examples of her own work. But the most shocking revelation was that Rachel had been actively soliciting advance orders and deposits from potential customers based on her fake bakery business. Marcus found evidence that she had collected $47,000 in deposits from couples who wanted custom wedding cakes for upcoming ceremonies. She had promised elaborate multi-tier cakes with intricate decorations, providing detailed sketches and flavor descriptions for orders she had no intention or ability to fulfill. Armed with this evidence, I made a decision that would change our family dynamics forever. Instead of confronting Rachel privately or involving my parents in emotional arguments, I planned a formal family meeting where I would present the facts systematically and offer a structured solution that would hold everyone accountable while providing a path toward healing. I sent formal invitations to my parents, Rachel, and several key extended family members who had been drawn into Rachel's web of manipulation over the years. The invitation simply stated that I had important information to share about recent family financial decisions, and that I hoped everyone could attend to discuss solutions that would benefit everyone involved. On the evening of the meeting, I arrived at my parents' house with a detailed presentation that I had prepared using the same systematic approach I employed for corporate merger negotiations. I had organized all of Marcus's findings into clear categories with supporting documentation, photographs, and financial records that told an undeniable story of deception and fraud. Rachel arrived late, as usual, and immediately began complaining about the formal nature of the meeting and questioning why I had invited extended family members to discuss private family matters. Her defensive attitude and obvious nervousness confirmed that she suspected the true purpose of the gathering. I began the presentation by acknowledging the pain and confusion that had characterized our recent family interactions, and expressing my commitment to finding solutions that would protect everyone while ensuring accountability for past mistakes. I then systematically presented the evidence of Rachel's financial deception, starting with her history of failed businesses and progressing through the detailed documentation of how she had spent the money from my car sale. The room fell completely silent as I displayed bank records showing the luxury purchases, travel expenses, and fraudulent customer deposits. Rachel's face went through a series of expressions from confusion to anger to panic as she realized the depth of investigation I had conducted and the strength of evidence I had compiled. When I finished presenting the facts, I offered Rachel a choice that demonstrated both firmness and compassion. She could either voluntarily enter into a structured repayment agreement that would allow her to make restitution to all affected parties over an 18-month period, or I would be forced to pursue legal remedies, including criminal fraud charges and civil lawsuits, to recover the stolen money and protect her victims. The repayment plan I proposed was demanding but achievable. Rachel would be required to return all remaining money from the car sale within 30 days, secure legitimate employment to begin making monthly restitution payments, and provide full transparency about her financial activities going forward. In exchange, I would work with the couples she had defrauded to negotiate settlement agreements that would allow them to find alternative vendors for their wedding cakes without suffering complete financial loss. The choice was hers, but the days of manipulation, lies, and consequence-free failure were over forever. Rachel's response to my ultimatum was everything I had expected and worse. Instead of accepting responsibility or showing genuine remorse for the pain she had caused, she launched into the most vicious and manipulative campaign I had ever witnessed from anyone, let alone a family member. Her first tactic was to paint herself as the victim of my supposedly cruel and vindictive nature. She told anyone who would listen that her successful brother was using his wealth and power to destroy her dreams simply because he was jealous of the love and attention their parents had always shown her. According to Rachel's version of events, I was a cold, calculating corporate shark who had never cared about family relationships and was now proving my heartless nature by demanding repayment of money that had been freely given to help her achieve her entrepreneurial goals. The story she crafted was psychologically sophisticated and emotionally appealing to family members who did not have access to the evidence I had presented. Rachel claimed that my demand for documentation and repayment was really about establishing dominance and control over the family, using my financial success to make everyone dependent on my approval. She suggested that my real motivation was resentment over the fact that our parents had always supported her creativity and independent spirit while expecting me to be responsible and self-sufficient. Rachel's manipulation campaign extended far beyond our immediate family. She contacted aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends with tearful phone calls describing how I was threatening to destroy her life over a car that I rarely drove and did not really need. She emphasized my high income and successful career, suggesting that demanding repayment from his struggling sister was evidence of greed and selfishness that should concern everyone who cared about our family's values. The emotional manipulation was particularly effective with older family members who remembered Rachel as a creative and sensitive child who had always seemed to need extra protection and support. Several relatives called my parents to express concern about my harsh treatment of my sister, urging them to intervene and encourage me to be more understanding and forgiving of her mistakes. But Rachel's counterattack went beyond simple emotional manipulation. Desperate to avoid the consequences of her actions, she began spreading malicious lies about my personal and professional integrity. She suggested to family members that my wealth might have come from unethical business practices, hinting that someone my age could not have achieved such financial success without cutting corners or taking advantage of others. The lies escalated when Rachel began telling people that I had threatened her with physical violence during our family meeting, claiming that my calm and systematic presentation of evidence was actually intimidating behavior designed to frighten her into submission. She described feeling afraid to be alone with me, and suggested that my success in corporate mergers was evidence of an aggressive personality that had finally turned against his own family. These false accusations were particularly painful because they attacked the reputation for integrity and professionalism that I had spent years building in the business world. Rachel seemed to understand instinctively that undermining my credibility was her best defense against the overwhelming evidence of her own wrongdoing. The most dangerous escalation came when Rachel attempted to solve her financial problems through additional fraud rather than honest repayment. Marcus's continued surveillance revealed that she was attempting to take out loans and credit lines using our parents' home as collateral without their knowledge or consent. She had obtained copies of property deeds and financial documents, apparently planning to forge their signatures on loan applications that would give her access to additional cash while putting our parents' home at even greater risk. The forgery scheme was elaborate and might have succeeded if Marcus had not been monitoring her activities closely. Rachel had researched online lenders that offered fast approval processes with minimal verification requirements, and she had practiced forging our parents' signatures until they were nearly indistinguishable from the originals. Her plan was to secure $50,000 in home equity loans that she could use to make partial restitution payments while buying time to develop new manipulation strategies. Fortunately, Marcus discovered the scheme before Rachel could submit any loan applications. When confronted with evidence of her attempted fraud, She claimed that she had been trying to help our parents by securing money they could use to make their overdue mortgage payments. She insisted that she had planned to tell them about the loans eventually, and that her intentions had been good despite her dishonest methods. The forgery incident marked a turning point in Rachel's relationship with her boyfriend Marcus, who had been enjoying the benefits of her fraudulent spending but had not realized the extent of her criminal behavior. When he learned that she was facing potential jail time for fraud and theft charges, and that her access to family money was ending permanently, he quickly distanced himself from the relationship and stopped supporting her emotional manipulation campaigns. Rachel's isolation grew more complete as extended family members began to learn the truth about her financial deception and the evidence I had compiled to support my demands for restitution. The relatives who had initially supported her began to understand that they had been manipulated with false information, and their sympathy shifted toward concern about the damage she had caused to our family's trust and financial security. But even as her support network collapsed and her legal situation became increasingly precarious, Rachel continued to blame everyone else for her problems, while refusing to accept genuine responsibility for the choices that had created the crisis. Her final desperate gambit was an attempt to convince our parents that I was mentally unstable, and that my demands for accountability were evidence of a psychological breakdown that required professional intervention. The suggestion that I needed psychiatric help because I wanted my stolen car returned and fraudulent activities stopped was so absurd that it finally opened our parents' eyes to the depth of Rachel's manipulative behavior and her complete disconnection from reality and personal responsibility. The comprehensive investigation that Marcus conducted over the following weeks revealed a pattern of fraudulent behavior that extended far beyond the theft of money from our family. What we discovered was that Rachel had been operating multiple sophisticated scams simultaneously, using her supposed bakery business as a front for systematic fraud that affected dozens of innocent victims throughout the Austin metropolitan area. The wedding cake deposits that Marcus had initially uncovered represented only the beginning of a much larger criminal enterprise. Rachel had created detailed contracts and business agreements with 43 couples planning weddings over the next 8 months, collecting advance payments ranging from $800 to $3,000 for elaborate custom cakes that she had no intention or ability to create. The total amount of fraudulent deposits reached $94,000, far exceeding the $47,000 Marcus had initially documented. But the wedding fraud was just one component of Rachel's criminal activities. She had also been collecting payments from local restaurants and catering companies for supposed wholesale baking services, promising to provide regular deliveries of artisanal breads and desserts at competitive prices. She had convinced 6 different businesses to pay advance orders, totaling $31,000, providing them with fake business licenses and fraudulent insurance certificates to support her legitimacy as a commercial food supplier. Even more disturbing was Marcus's discovery that Rachel had successfully obtained a small business loan of $35,000 from a community development financial institution that specialized in supporting women entrepreneurs. The loan application contained completely false information about her business experience, projected revenues, and intended use of funds. She had provided fabricated financial statements, fake customer references, and forged documents purporting to show successful completion of commercial baking certification programs. The small business loan fraud was particularly egregious because the community development organization was specifically designed to help legitimate entrepreneurs from underserved communities build sustainable businesses and economic opportunities. Rachel had stolen money that was intended to support genuine small business development, potentially preventing deserving applicants from accessing the capital they needed for real ventures. When Marcus presented this evidence to me, I realized that the situation had moved far beyond a family dispute about money and accountability. Rachel was engaged in criminal activity that was harming innocent people throughout our community, and my obligation to protect those victims outweighed any family loyalty considerations. I made the decision to contact local law enforcement and provide them with all the evidence Marcus had compiled. Detective Sarah Morrison of the Travis County Sheriff's Office Economic Crimes Unit was assigned to the case, and she immediately recognized the seriousness and scope of Rachel's fraudulent activities. Detective Morrison explained that Rachel could face multiple felony charges, including theft by deception, fraud, forgery, and operating a criminal enterprise. The total amount of money involved exceeded $160,000, which placed the crimes in a category that carried potential prison sentences of 5 to 10 years, if prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But before moving forward with criminal charges, Detective Morrison offered Rachel an opportunity to cooperate with law enforcement in making full restitution to all victims and providing complete information about her fraudulent activities. The plea agreement would still involve criminal charges and a permanent criminal record, but it would likely result in probation and community service rather than prison time if Rachel demonstrated genuine remorse and full cooperation. The extended family members who had initially supported Rachel's manipulation campaign were horrified to learn about the true scope of her criminal behavior. Aunts and uncles who had pressured me to be more understanding and forgiving called to apologize for their earlier criticism and express their shock at discovering how thoroughly they had been deceived about the situation. My parents finally understood the magnitude of the crisis they had enabled through years of unconditional financial support and emotional enablement. The realization that their daughter was facing potential felony charges and prison time forced them to confront the reality that their attempts to help her had actually enabled increasingly serious criminal behavior. The most difficult conversation came when Detective Morrison interviewed my parents about their role in facilitating Rachel's crimes. While they had not knowingly participated in fraud, their decision to sell my car without permission and their pattern of providing large amounts of money without oversight had created opportunities for Rachel to engage in larger-scale criminal activities. My parents were devastated to learn that their loving intentions had contributed to a situation that was now harming innocent couples planning their weddings and legitimate small businesses trying to support their communities. The guilt and shame they felt about enabling Rachel's criminal behavior was overwhelming, and they begged me to help them find a way to make amends for their poor judgment. But the most significant development was Rachel's gradual realization that she was facing real consequences for the first time in her adult life. The possibility of felony convictions and prison time forced her to confront the reality that her pattern of manipulation and fraud could no longer be sustained through emotional appeals and blame-shifting. Detective Morrison's offer of a plea agreement provided a final opportunity for Rachel to demonstrate genuine remorse and accept responsibility for her actions. The alternative was prosecution on multiple felony charges, with the possibility of significant prison time and a permanent criminal record that would affect every aspect of her future life. The choice was entirely hers, but the days of consequence-free fraud and family-enabled irresponsibility were over forever. Justice was finally within reach, not just for our family but for all the innocent victims who had trusted Rachel's lies and suffered financial losses as a result of her criminal behavior. The resolution of our family crisis came through a combination of justice, accountability, and ultimately, healing that none of us could have anticipated when the ordeal began. Rachel's decision to accept Detective Morrison's plea agreement marked the beginning of a transformation process that would change our family dynamics forever. Under the terms of the plea agreement, Rachel pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud and theft, receiving a sentence of 3 years probation, with the requirement to make full restitution to all victims within 2 years. She was also required to perform 400 hours of community service and attend weekly financial counseling sessions to address the underlying attitudes and behaviors that had led to her criminal activities. But more importantly than the legal consequences, Rachel was finally forced to confront the reality of the harm she had caused to real people who had trusted her. The couples who had paid deposits for wedding cakes that would never exist, the restaurants that had prepaid for wholesale baking services, and the community development organization that had provided small business loans based on fraudulent applications, were all real victims with real financial losses. The process of making restitution required Rachel to take responsibility in ways she had never experienced before. She secured employment at 3 different jobs, working as a server at a downtown restaurant, a retail associate at a clothing store, and a weekend catering assistant for legitimate food service businesses. For the first time in her adult life, she was earning money through honest work, rather than manipulation and fraud. The financial counseling sessions proved equally transformative. Rachel's counselor, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, specialized in working with people who had developed destructive patterns of financial behavior and helped Rachel understand the psychological roots of her sense of entitlement and her tendency to view other people's money as resources she deserved to access. The counseling revealed that Rachel's manipulative behavior stemmed from deep insecurity about her own capabilities and worth, combined with a learned pattern of using emotional appeals to avoid the difficult work of building genuine skills and relationships. Dr. Walsh helped Rachel understand that her previous business failures had occurred not because of external circumstances or bad luck, but because she had never developed the discipline and persistence required for real success. While Rachel was beginning her journey toward accountability and personal growth, I focused on helping my parents rebuild their financial security and learn to establish healthier boundaries in their relationships with both of their children. The foreclosure threat on their home required immediate attention, and I worked with their mortgage company to negotiate a modification plan that would allow them to keep their house while gradually paying down the debt they had accumulated through years of enabling Rachel's financial dependence. But I made it clear that my financial assistance came with conditions that would prevent future repetition of the same destructive patterns. My parents agreed to attend family counseling sessions with Dr. Walsh to address their tendency to enable irresponsible behavior and their difficulty distinguishing between loving support and harmful enablement. The counseling sessions helped my parents understand that their efforts to protect Rachel from natural consequences had actually prevented her from developing the resilience and problem-solving skills necessary for adult independence. They learned that genuine love sometimes required allowing people to experience the results of their choices rather than constantly rescuing them from difficulty. One of the most meaningful developments in our family's healing process was my father's request to help me restore another 1967 Shelby Cobra as a way of understanding what he and my mother had destroyed when they sold my original car. Through Jerry Richardson at Premium Auto Classics, I located a Cobra that was in similar condition to my original car when my grandfather and I had first begun our restoration project. Working on the new car with my father created an opportunity for him to understand the true meaning of the restoration process and the depth of the bond it had represented between my grandfather and me. As we spent weekends in the garage together, sanding rust and rebuilding engine components, my father began to comprehend the patience, skill, and dedication that had gone into creating something beautiful and valuable from what appeared to be worthless junk. The restoration project also provided a way for my father to experience the satisfaction of building something lasting through careful attention to detail and persistent effort over time. He later told me that working on the car helped him understand why the original Cobra had meant so much to me, and why its loss had represented such a profound betrayal of trust and connection. My mother's healing process focused on addressing the anxiety and enabling behaviors that had contributed to our family's crisis. Through therapy and medication management, she learned to recognize the difference between supporting family members and allowing herself to be manipulated by emotional appeals that bypassed rational judgment. The most surprising aspect of our family's transformation was Rachel's gradual development of genuine remorse and accountability. As she worked multiple jobs to make restitution payments and began to understand the real impact of her actions on innocent victims, something fundamental shifted in her perspective and behavior. The turning point came when Rachel volunteered to speak at a community workshop about financial fraud prevention, sharing her story as a cautionary example of how entitlement and manipulation could escalate into criminal behavior that harmed entire communities. Her willingness to accept public accountability and use her experience to help others avoid similar mistakes demonstrated genuine growth and maturity. By the end of Rachel's probation period, she had not only made full restitution to all her victims, but had also completed additional community service hours beyond what was required. She had maintained steady employment, developed a savings account for the first time in her adult life, and begun pursuing legitimate education in business management through evening classes at Austin Community College. The completion of the second Cobra restoration provided an opportunity for our family to celebrate both the healing of our relationships and the honor we had restored to my grandfather's memory. When I took Grandma Betty for her first ride in the new car, she told me that Grandpa Thomas would have been proud not just of the beautiful restoration work, but of the way our family had learned to hold each other accountable while still offering love and support through difficult times. The life lesson that emerged from our ordeal was that genuine love requires both compassion and accountability. Protecting people from the consequences of their choices may feel like kindness, but it actually prevents the growth and learning that comes from facing challenges honestly. Real family support means holding each other to high standards while providing encouragement and assistance for those who are genuinely working to improve their lives. Our family emerged stronger because we learned to distinguish between helping and enabling, between supporting dreams and funding delusions, and between forgiveness and acceptance of continued harmful behavior. The process was painful and required fundamental changes in how we related to each other, but it created the foundation for relationships based on honesty, respect, and mutual accountability. The final satisfaction came from knowing that justice had been served not through revenge or punishment, but through a process that required everyone involved to grow and change in ways that honored both individual responsibility and family connection. Rachel learned to value honest work and genuine relationships. My parents learned to offer love without enabling destructive behavior, and I learned that fighting for what is right sometimes requires risking temporary family conflict to achieve lasting family healing. As I write this story, Rachel has been working steadily for 3 years and has started her own legitimate small business providing bookkeeping services for local restaurants. She uses the financial management skills she learned during her recovery to help other small business owners maintain accurate records and avoid the financial mistakes that can lead to business failure. The irony is not lost on any of us that her greatest success came only after she learned to operate with complete honesty and transparency. My parents have rebuilt their financial security and learned to enjoy retirement without the constant stress of managing financial crises created by enabling behaviors. They take pride in both of their children's genuine achievements, rather than making excuses for destructive choices or creating artificial success through financial bailouts. And I have learned that true family loyalty sometimes requires difficult conversations and firm boundaries, rather than unconditional acceptance of harmful behavior. The restored Cobra sits in my garage as a reminder not only of my grandfather's love and wisdom, but of the importance of building something lasting through patience, skill, and unwavering commitment to quality and integrity. What would you have done if your family betrayed your trust by selling something precious to fund someone else's irresponsible behavior? Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and demanding accountability for harmful actions? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding justice through perseverance. Share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding the difference between helping and enabling, because sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to make other people's problems easier to ignore. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you build stronger, more honest relationships with the people you care about most.